Yes, our live on YouTube.
Right, very excited. Let me share your screen. All right. Okay, so it's really exciting to get back to our plan to win framework. And just as a matter of introduction, this is building on the back of Roger Martin's playing to win framework for strategy planning. And so what we've been doing is applying that same framework uh, for strategic workforce planning. And of course, we can uh, use the same framework for any kind of strategy planning, including strategy portfolio planning um, uh, and similar kind of plans. Now, why do we do this? It's because we're trying to focus on a win. A win is not a given in any situation, let alone when you're trying to stand up or execute a strategic plan. And we know that because 40% of strategic plans, only 40% of strategic plans will ever fully launch, because 60% of strategic plans actually never fully launch. We also know that 70% of complex strategies fail. Yes. And to that point, 10% of annual revenue is lost to strategic misalignment. So we know from these numbers that it's not a given that the fact that you have a strategy or the fact that you created a strategic plan then means that you are going to win. As a matter of fact, I do say that there are many times when the strategy is to not win, right? This happens when sometimes you go into a situation and you're not trying to come out of that situation with a win. That's possible. And so for companies and organizations and teams who do need to win in the situation that they're going into, who do need to stand up a workforce, a team that can deliver what they've defined as a win, then this applies. Okay. And what this framework does is it compels you, it makes you put the win, the definition of win, in the center and forefront of the entire planning process. Okay. And to do that, what we're going to do today practically is we're going to look at a policy, a strategy document that's been released by a commercial bank. And we're going to use our framework to open up and dissect that strategy document. And then we're going to see the definition of win from that strategy document. And we'll discuss how you can apply that when you're doing your own plan or when you've been handed a strategy, some strategy outcomes by leadership. What should you do? How could you extract from that what a win means and set yourself up, set your team up, set your company up for that win? Okay. So again, this is based on playing to win. Our strategy really works by Roger Martin. Roger Martin, if you don't know who that is a strategy professor, very, very very well celebrated academic uh, around the topic of strategy. He's been cited 16,700 times. But more importantly, he's someone who's also involved in industry. And if you do want, you can get in touch with me. There are dozens and dozens of case studies that's been published, both by Roger and his team, other people who have used his framework, and also by us, for our customers. So do let me know if that's of interest. Okay. So again, I also want to go through what the 5 choices are. But before that, the plan to win framework goes like this. We take a strategy document. We analyze that strategy document for the 5 choices that Roger argues has to be made for a strategy to be a winning strategy. For SWP, we can then put those 5 choices, put against them a workforce mirror, and ask sort of a reflective 5 questions that's very, very tailored, very, very much around workforce planning. If we're doing this for other strategy planning, we will ask a different kind of question. So, for example, if we're doing strategy portfolio planning, we will ask sort of portfolio questions, and you see in a minute when we get there. So that's what we want to cover in this webinar in sort of the next 10 minutes, really. So what are those 5 questions? The first question the Roger says we need to ask whenever we're looking at strategy is, straight off the start, what is our winning aspiration? Okay, what's the purpose of going through the process of defining strategy? What's the purpose? What's the reason why we're going to make these choices of what we're going to do, and also, more importantly, choices of what we are not going to do? Okay, that's question 1. And then going beyond that, asking where will we compete? Okay, and this is not just about geography, right? This is about channels. This is about industry. This is about making choices about where we want to be, where we want to play. And every time we make a choice around where we want to be, we're also making a choice around where we don't want to be, given the fact that we don't want to be everywhere at the same time. So it's what are we going to do? And certainly, where are we not going to compete? And you're going to see that in a minute when we look at Barclays 2025's strategy document, where it's very, very clear around, right, where does Barclays want to compete, right? Again, geography, but beyond geography, what industry, what niche, where do they want to win? Okay. And straight after that, we want to ask the question, how will we win? So we've determined why we want to go through this process. So what's our winning aspiration? Why are we even making these choices, right? That's determined. And then we're saying, right, where do we want to apply these choices, right? Where do we want to compete? And then how are we going to win in that space? Okay, right. Because ultimately, the difference between company A and company B, team A and team B, is the beautiful dynamic that comes from the people, the humans that make up that team. Because it is not possible to have 2 teams. If you have 2 teams with different humans, you cannot get the same blend of competitive advantage and the same blend of behavior from the 2. It's not possible. Every human is unique. And so what makes your team unique, what gives you your competitive advantage, is the blend of the behaviors of everybody in your team brought together. It's a smoothie, the beautiful juice that only your team can produce, that other teams cannot produce. Okay. And this is why it's important for us to go through the process of saying, right, what does our team look like, right? What are our signature skills? What is it that my team can do that no other team can do? Okay. And that's what's unique about us, because this is going to be really important in how we play and therefore how we win. Okay. And straight after that is, what are the capabilities that must be in place for us to win? So we need to understand our team, right? Aristotle said, to thyself be true. For our team, we need to know who we are. We need to know our strengths. We need to know, the unique blend of our behaviors, right? And then on the other side, we need to know what we must have, what capabilities must be in place for us to win, so that we can map our strengths to those capabilities, so we can make sure that our team, where we are, how we are, can produce the capabilities. Usually, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to say, right, what are the 20% of effort, 20% of positions, 20% of must-have capabilities that can deliver 80% of the value that we defined at the start of this process. Okay. And finally, this one gets more exciting as we go beyond, today, because today we're just going to focus on really just how we define and how we extract the win. But when it comes to implementation, it gets very, very exciting. The final question is, what are the management systems that's required to support our choices, to support our team, right? What are the management systems that is a must-have that supports our ritual, that supports our metrics, that supports us, right? Because a digital first team and an analog first team do not need the same kind of support. Okay. So at this point, I'd like to sort of jump into Confluence, open my whiteboard and go through these 5 questions. Try to stop. All right, fantastic. I'll go through these 5 questions just as we've done. So what I've done is I took Barclays annual report for 2025 and asked Rovo to read into that annual report and draw out for us the answers to these 5 choices to help us draw out, what are the winning aspirations that was defined in 2025 by Barclays. Okay. And we've got that here. As a matter of fact, I also have a deep dive. Well, I'm supposed to have a deep dive. It's gone somewhere. Okay, let me do a refresh on the page and see if I get our deep dive back. I also have a deep dive on great job. Yeah, we've got it back. On those 5 choices, okay, and I want to talk you through them, right, how it's all organized. So today, our focus is on question number 1. How can you determine the winning aspiration of your company, of your team, the winning aspiration that's been defined in a strategy document, okay? And therefore, if you're creating your own strategy document, if that's your role, how do you focus and how do you organize the answer to that question around our winning aspiration? Okay, so for Barclays 2025, they've said their purpose is to work together for a better financial future. In working together, they're talking about working together with stakeholders, working together with customers, right? With shareholders, right? With communities, so government and everybody else. And the vision is to have to be a UK-centered leader in global finance. Okay. And they talked about their strategy for this winning aspiration is to be a simpler bank, a better bank, and a more balanced bank. Okay. And of course, all of this is to come together to deliver a positive outcome for customers, colleagues, society, and investors. So that's that definition of who they're working with. Now, let's deep dive into that a little bit. Okay. Looking at the components of this winning aspiration, you've got sort of your definition, the purpose, to try to be clear with that, working together, bringing all these four stakeholders together for a better financial future for everybody. The vision is to be UK centered. So this is interesting when we actually do come back for the next episode. We're going to be talking about where to play. And so in this case, you can see very, very clearly one of the definitions from Barclays around where to play is they want to be a UK bank, right? And we'll talk about what that means, right? Next time we're together. But for today, it's really key that part of the winning aspiration is that the growth, the better financial future that they seek has to happen within the UK market, right? It doesn't mean that it has to be fed only by the UK market, but it is there, within the UK market that they seek leadership. And therefore, the definition of win is we're global financial leaders, but we're UK centric. It's very, very key. So in market position, we want to lead, with a global reach while staying as a UK bank. It's very, very key because all of this then determines the focus, right? And next time when we start to talk about where to play, we would dig a bit further into focus areas. Okay, so to be able to get a definition of what the winning aspiration is for your strategy, you can, in this case, what I've done is I've asked AI, I've asked Rover to look in and to consider Roger Martin's framework and to consider our framework and use that to cut out this definition. You could also just read in and you're trying to find lines within the document that answer the question of purpose, answer the question of vision, answer the question of direction, answer the question of position, answer the question of outcomes, right? You're looking for outcomes. You're looking for, does this sort of define an outcome in some way? If yes, then we're writing that down. That could be pointing us towards understanding our winning aspiration. Okay. So here with and just to say that if you do want a white paper on this framework, if you do want a guide or a run book on how to define and extract and understand any of these 5 choices, please do get in touch on LinkedIn or YouTube. Just, leave a comment and I'll be much more than happy to make sure that you do get those as soon as possible. Okay, so here we've got the definition. We're looking at how we can operationalize those aspirations. So making sure that those aspirations are actually doable, right? They're hopefully big, hairy, audacious goals in there, but those goals are actually goals that possibly can be achieved. Okay, so in the last few minutes, if I break this down into goals, and in this case, I might want to put this in the goals app in Atlassian, goes up in Jira. If you have Jira, goes up is free. It's nothing extra to pay. I've asked Rovo to go ahead and help me break down this winning aspiration definition that we've done here, break it down into goals. And I'm more than happy to share this with you as well. Please let me know if you want to. And so our big, hairy, audacious goal, be hag, as they would say, is really, really to be a bank that is a leading financial service, is to be a bank that can deliver a better financial future while being UK centric. Okay. How do we break this BHAG into strategic goals and strategic outcomes? Here we talked about capturing the high level aspiration. And so capturing the fact that a big part of this is we want to be a simpler, better, more balanced Barclays. Okay, that is one goal. Also, the other goal is looking at market position, right? We want to be a leading bank again, because these are goals. This can be just qualitative. There doesn't need to be any quantitative definition here because it's just goals, right? Once we, at the next episode, once we get into focus areas, we need to start getting more quantitative. We need to start getting into what are the metrics with which we can measure if we're achieving or delivering on this focus. But for now, we keep it open, we keep it qualitative. It's right. Our market position is defined. We want to be a leading bank. We want to be a leading UK bank. We want to deliver shareholder value. We want to lead in sustainable banking. It's very, very important to them because they've said that they want to facilitate $1 trillion in sustainable finance by 2030. Okay. We also want to make sure that, the ROT is greater than 10% by 2030. Again, we're starting to get into more quantitative measures here. Okay. Talked about the 3 pillars, okay, for the strategic execution model, which is simpler bank, which means a streamlined operation. Okay. Better bank, enhanced customer experience. Balanced bank, diversified revenue streams. Okay. And those are really, really key. And for a bank that is aiming and whose strategic objective and strategic outcome is to have a streamlined operation, right? We will start to define next time what that means. What does that mean in reality? What does that mean in numbers? What does that mean in terms of, what's the definition of an operation that's more streamlined than what we have today? Okay. Then we want a better bank. We're talking about customer experience, improving customer experience. What does that mean? Right? How do we measure that the customer is getting a better experience? Okay. And maybe the easiest is having a diversified revenue stream. Again, there's going to be a formula for that, and we'll look at that next time. Okay. So what we've done today is we've reintroduced this framework. We've talked about how to get the goals, how to get the defined strategic outcomes, right? And how to write those down, how to extract that from a strategy document, and how to put those down and be able to register those as goals within a tool like Jira. Okay, that's what we've covered so far. And I'm more than happy to share this workbook with you. Do we have any questions as we've now come up to time? Any questions? Okay, 1 second. All right. And apologies for the noise. I've just been told that there was noise in the background. I think that was just my noise cancelling headphones not cancelling that, not aligning with the strategy. But do we have any questions at all? Okay, so for we'll leave this here in terms of our introduction episode today, which is just looking at, can we take a document from that document, where the strategy is already defined? Can we extract those strategy conversation and can we bring it out? So next time that we meet, which I think is this same time next week, we're going to go deeper and go into focus areas. Thank you so much for joining today. It's such a pleasure to have you. Lewis? Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ewu, for it was a wonderful session. And if we don't have questions, then see you same time next week for another interesting session. I can always reach out to us even after now with your questions, and we'll get back to you. All right. Thank you, and bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye.